What happens when two powerhouse women in the music industry find themselves on opposite sides of a conversation that nobody saw coming? When Sabrina Carpenter stepped onto the Kelly Clarkson Show set that Tuesday afternoon, both she and Kelly thought they were in for another lighthearted chat about music, touring, and life in the spotlight. But what started as a routine interview quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history, culminating in Sabrina doing something that left the entire studio in stunned silence. Before we dive into exactly what went down, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because this story is going to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about celebrity interviews. Kelly Clarkson leaned back in her signature chair, that warm smile spreading across her face as she glanced down at her notes one final time. The audience was buzzing with anticipation, phones already out and recording as they always did when a young pop star graced the stage. Sabrina Carpenter walked out, waving to the crowd with that practiced ease that comes from years of performing, her blonde hair catching the studio lights perfectly as she settled into the guest chair. "Sabrina Carpenter, everybody," Kelly announced, clapping along with the audience. "Thank you so much for being here. I am such a huge fan of your music. Thank you for having me." "This is so exciting," Sabrina replied, her voice carrying that sweet, almost innocent quality that had endeared her to millions of fans worldwide. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so natural it seemed effortless. Kelly shuffled her cards slightly, that trademark enthusiasm building in her voice. "So, I have to ask because I know everyone wants to know. Your new album has been absolutely crushing it on the charts. The vulnerability in some of these songs is just incredible. How do you find the courage to put such personal experiences out there for the world to dissect?" Sabrina's smile faltered for just a microsecond, so briefly that most viewers probably missed it entirely. But Kelly, seasoned interviewer that she was, caught it immediately. "Well, I think as artists, we have a responsibility to be honest with our audience. When something resonates with me personally, I hope it can help someone else feel less alone in their experience." "That's beautiful," Kelly nodded. But there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't quite satisfied with that answer. She leaned forward slightly, her next question carrying a weight that made the studio atmosphere shift almost imperceptibly. "But some of these songs, particularly the track about betrayal and trust issues, they feel so specific, almost like you're addressing someone directly. Is there a particular relationship or situation that inspired that level of emotional intensity?" The question hung in the air for a moment longer than comfortable. Sabrina's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and for the first time since sitting down, her media training seemed to waver. "I prefer to let the music speak for itself, rather than dissect the personal details behind it." Kelly tilted her head, that interviewer instinct kicking in full force. She could sense there was more to dig into here, and her next words would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. "I completely understand wanting privacy, but when you put lyrics out there like the ones in that song about someone who promised they'd always be there and then disappeared when things got complicated, it almost feels like you want people to connect those dots." Sabrina's hands, which had been resting casually in her lap, suddenly gripped the armrests of her chair. "Kelly, I think you might be reading too much into things." But Kelly Clarkson had built her career on being relatable, on getting to the heart of real emotion, and she could practically taste the story that was just beneath the surface. "I'm sorry if this feels invasive, but I think your fans deserve to understand the real woman behind these incredibly raw songs. When you sing about someone who made promises they couldn't keep, someone who left you questioning your worth, that's not just artistic expression, that's lived experience." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Sabrina's smile had completely vanished now, replaced by something that looked dangerously close to barely contained frustration. "Kelly, I came here to talk about my music and my tour, not to psychoanalyze my personal relationships on national television." Kelly raised her hands in a gesture that might have been meant to be apologetic, but her voice carried forward with that same probing intensity. "I hear you, I really do. But when your music is this personal, when it's clearly drawn from real pain and real disappointment, don't you think your fans have a right to understand the context? Especially when there are rumors swirling about certain high-profile relationships that ended around the same time you wrote these songs." That was the moment everything changed. Sabrina's entire posture shifted, her back straightening as her eyes flashed with something that looked remarkably like anger. "What rumors exactly are you referring to, Kelly?" Kelly's eyes lit up with the kind of recognition that every talk show host lives for. That moment when they know they've struck gold. She leaned back slightly, but her voice carried a confidence that suggested she was more than prepared for this question. Well, there have been quite a few articles and social media discussions about your relationship with that actor. The one who was photographed with someone else just weeks after you two were seen together at those award shows. The timeline seems to match up pretty perfectly with when you started writing the more emotionally charged tracks on this album. The studio audience, which had been murmuring quietly throughout the exchange, fell into complete silence. Even the camera operators seemed to lean in closer, sensing that they were witnessing something far more explosive than a typical celebrity interview. Sabrina's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady, though there was an unmistakable edge creeping into her tone. I'm not sure what you're implying, Kelly, but I think you're making some pretty significant assumptions based on tabloid speculation and social media gossip. Sabrina's hands were now clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were beginning to turn white. My songwriting process is much more complex than just documenting my dating life for public consumption. Kelly nodded, but there was something almost predatory in her expression now. Like a shark that had tasted blood in the water, of course, and I don't mean to oversimplify your artistic process, but when you have lyrics like, and I'm quoting here, you said forever, but forever was a lie. Now I see you with her, and I finally understand why. That's pretty specific language. That's not metaphorical heartbreak. That's someone who got blindsided by infidelity. Sabrina's entire body tensed, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually stand up and leave right then and there. Instead, she took a deep breath and fixed Kelly with a stare that could have melted steel. You know what, Kelly? You're absolutely right. Those lyrics are specific. They're specific because they're about real pain and real betrayal. But what you seem to be missing is that I chose to put that pain into my music, not into a tell-all interview where I name names and destroy someone's reputation for the sake of entertainment. The audience was completely captivated now. Phones recording every second of what was clearly becoming one of the most uncomfortable interviews in recent memory. Kelly, however, seemed energized by Sabrina's pushback, as if she finally felt like she was getting to the real story. But isn't that exactly what you're doing with the music? Kelly pressed, her voice taking on an almost challenging tone. You're telling the story. You're putting it out there for millions of people to hear and interpret. The only difference is you're not providing the context that would help people understand what really happened. Some might argue that's actually more damaging because it leaves room for speculation and rumor. Sabrina let out a laugh, but there was absolutely no humor in it. So now you're suggesting that I should have been more explicit about my personal trauma, that I should have made it easier for people like you to dissect my private life on television. I'm suggesting, Kelly said, her own voice growing firmer, that when you make your private life public through your art, you can't then act surprised when people want to understand the full story. Your fans invest emotionally in your music. They deserve to know whether they're supporting someone who's being genuine or someone who's manipulating their emotions for commercial gain. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sabrina's mouth actually fell open for a moment, as if she couldn't quite believe what she had just heard. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but absolutely lethal. Did you just accuse me of manipulating my fans by writing about my own experiences? Sabrina asked, each word carefully enunciated. Did you just suggest that my pain, my real actual heartbreak, is somehow calculated manipulation designed to sell records? Kelly realized she had perhaps pushed too far, but instead of backing down, she doubled down with the kind of misguided confidence that makes for truly spectacular television disasters. I'm not saying it's calculated, but I am saying that when you package personal trauma as entertainment, there are ethical questions that come into play. Your fans think they know you. They think they're supporting someone who's being vulnerable and honest with them, but you're only giving them half the story. Sabrina stood up so abruptly that her chair actually rolled backwards several inches. The studio fell into the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals or natural disasters. Every person in that room, from the audience members to the production crew, knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. You know what's really unethical, Kelly? Sabrina's voice was now loud enough that every microphone in the studio picked it up perfectly. What's unethical is inviting someone onto your show under the pretense of discussing their work and then ambushing them with invasive questions about their personal relationships. What's unethical is suggesting that a young woman who chooses to process her heartbreak through art is somehow manipulating her audience. Kelly's face had flushed red, but she wasn't backing down. Sabrina, I think you're overreacting. This is what interviews are for, to go deeper than just the surface-level promotional material. If you can't handle questions about the inspiration behind your most personal work, maybe you shouldn't be putting that work out there. That was the moment when something in Sabrina's expression shifted completely from anger to something that looked almost like pity. You know what, Kelly? Sabrina said, her voice now carrying a calm that was somehow more terrifying than her previous anger. I came on this show because I respected you. I respected your journey, your authenticity, your ability to connect with people through honest conversation. But what you're doing right now isn't honest conversation. This is exploitation disguised as journalism. Kelly's face contorted with indignation, her own voice rising to match the intensity of the moment. Exploitation? I'm trying to have a real conversation with you instead of the sanitized, publicist-approved nonsense that most celebrities hide behind. Your fans deserve better than scripted responses and deflection. Sabrina took a step closer to Kelly's desk, her posture radiating the kind of controlled fury that comes from someone who has reached their absolute limit. My fans deserve better than watching their favorite artist get ambushed by someone who claims to support women in the industry. They deserve better than seeing me reduced to gossip fodder on national television. The audience was completely transfixed, many of them holding their breath as if they were afraid that even the slightest sound might break whatever spell was keeping this surreal scene going. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression, every gesture, every word of what was clearly becoming legendary television. Kelly stood up from her own chair now, bringing herself to the same level as her increasingly agitated guest. You can't have it both ways, Sabrina. You can't write songs that are clearly about specific people and specific situations, perform them for millions of fans, build your entire brand around vulnerability and authenticity, and then refuse to engage when someone asks you to be genuinely vulnerable and authentic. There is a difference, Sabrina said through gritted teeth, between artistic vulnerability and personal exploitation. There is a difference between sharing your emotional truth through music and having your private relationships dissected by someone who doesn't know anything about what actually happened. Kelly crossed her arms, a gesture that somehow made her look both defensive and aggressive at the same time. But I do know what happened. Everyone knows what happened. The photos, the timeline, the way he moved on so quickly, while you were clearly devastated. The only person pretending not to know what happened is you. The words hit Sabrina like a physical blow. Her composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped completely. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what I went through, what that relationship was really like, or what it cost me to put those experiences into my music. You're sitting here acting like you know my story better than I do based on paparazzi photos and internet rumors. Then tell me, Kelly challenged, her voice now matching Sabrina's in intensity. Tell me what really happened. Tell your fans what really inspired those songs. Stop hiding behind vague artistic metaphors and tell the truth. Sabrina stared at Kelly for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. But in the dead silence of the studio, every word carried with perfect clarity. The truth is that I loved someone who wasn't capable of loving me back the way I deserved. The truth is that I gave everything I had to someone who saw me as disposable. The truth is that I wrote those songs in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep because the betrayal felt like it was eating me alive from the inside out. Her voice grew stronger with each sentence. The truth is that I turned the worst experience of my life into art because that's what artists do. We transform pain into something beautiful so that maybe someone else won't feel as alone as we did. The studio remained silent, but Kelly wasn't satisfied. There was something almost manic in her eyes now, as if she could taste the exclusive revelation she'd been pushing for all along. But who was it? Your fans want to know who hurt you so badly. They want to be able to support you properly, to understand the full context of what you went through. Sabrina's expression shifted one final time, from pain to something that looked remarkably like disgust. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about getting a scoop or giving your audience some juicy celebrity gossip to talk about tomorrow. This is my life. This is my heart that got broken into a million pieces. And you're treating it like it's content for your show. I'm treating it like it's a story worth telling, Kelly shot back, her own frustration now boiling over. I'm treating it like you're brave enough to be honest with the people who support you instead of hiding behind corporate-approved talking points. Sabrina shook her head slowly, and for the first time since the interview began, she smiled. But it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that appears right before someone burns a bridge they never intend to cross again. You want honesty, Kelly? Here's some honesty for you. This interview right now is exactly why so many young artists are afraid to be genuinely vulnerable. Because people like you take our pain and turn it into entertainment. You take our healing process and turn it into gossip. You take our art and demand that we strip it down to the most basic invasive details so that your audience can feel like they're getting some kind of exclusive access to our trauma. Kelly's face was now bright red, but whether from embarrassment or anger was impossible to determine. I am trying to help you connect with your fans on a deeper level. I am trying to give you a platform to tell your story in your own words instead of letting other people control the narrative. No, Sabrina said firmly. You're trying to get me to say something controversial that will go viral and drive up your ratings. You're trying to turn my heartbreak into your content, and I'm done pretending that's acceptable. The silence that followed stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Kelly opened her mouth as if to respond, but Sabrina held up a hand that stopped her dead in her tracks. When Sabrina spoke again, her voice had returned to that eerily calm tone that somehow conveyed more power than any amount of shouting could have achieved. You know what the saddest part about this whole conversation is? Kelly, I actually looked up to you. I watched you in American Idol when I was just a kid dreaming of having a music career. I watched you navigate this industry with grace and authenticity, and I thought you understood what it meant to be a woman trying to tell her story on her own terms. Sabrina paused, letting that sink in. But right now, you're acting just like every other interviewer who thinks they're entitled to pieces of my soul because I chose to share my art with the world. Kelly's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words, but nothing came out. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, many of them looking uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what would undoubtedly become one of the most replayed clips in talk show history. I put my heart into those songs, Sabrina continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. I put my pain and my healing and my growth into that music because I wanted other people who had been through similar experiences to know they weren't alone. But I did not put my personal relationships into those songs so that people like you could turn them into tabloid headlines. Kelly finally found her voice, but it came out smaller than before. Almost defensive. Sabrina, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I wasn't trying to turn anything into tabloid headlines. I was trying to give you space to tell your story authentically. Sabrina let out another laugh, but this time it was filled with genuine disbelief. Space to tell my story. Kelly, you spent the last 15 minutes trying to force me to reveal intimate details about a relationship that nearly destroyed me. You accused me of manipulating my fans. You suggested that my artistic choices were somehow unethical. That's not giving me space. That's cornering me and demanding that I perform my trauma for your entertainment. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and at least one person could be heard whispering to their companion. Kelly's face cycled through several emotions: confusion, anger, embarrassment, before settling on something that looked almost like panic. I never said you were manipulating anyone, Kelly protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I was asking legitimate questions about the inspiration behind your work. No, Sabrina said firmly, taking another step toward Kelly's desk. You were fishing for gossip. You were trying to get me to confirm rumors and speculations so that you could have an exclusive moment for your show. You were treating my heartbreak like it was public property just because I chose to transform it into art. Kelly's hands were now visibly shaking, and she seemed to realize for the first time that this interview had gone completely off the rails. Sabrina, maybe we should take a break and restart this conversation. I think we got off on the wrong foot here. But Sabrina was already shaking her head, her expression resolute. There's no restarting this, Kelly. There's no taking back the fact that you ambushed me on national television. There's no undoing the fact that you just spent 20 minutes trying to extract personal information from me under the guise of authentic conversation. The studio had become so quiet that the hum of the cameras was audible. Sabrina looked directly into the nearest camera, and when she spoke, it was clear she was addressing her fans rather than Kelly or the studio audience. To anyone watching this who has ever been through heartbreak, who has ever had someone they trusted betray them, who has ever felt like their pain was being minimized or exploited, I want you to know that your story belongs to you. Your healing belongs to you. Your art, if you choose to create it, belongs to you. And you never, ever owe anyone more of your trauma than you're comfortable sharing. She turned back to Kelly, who was now sitting in her chair, looking like she wanted to disappear entirely. I came here to talk about my music, my tour, and my artistic growth. I did not come here to have my personal relationships dissected and analyzed for public consumption. I did not come here to be treated like my privacy is somehow less important than your audience's curiosity. Kelly made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Sabrina, please. I really think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we please just sit down and have a normal conversation about your incredible music? But Sabrina was already walking toward the edge of the stage. She turned back one final time, and her parting words would be replayed millions of times across social media in the hours that followed. Kelly, I hope someday you understand the difference between authentic conversation and invasive interrogation. I hope someday you realize that supporting women in this industry means respecting our boundaries, not pushing past them for the sake of content. She paused at the very edge of the stage. Thank you to your audience for being here today. I'm sorry they had to witness this. And with that, Sabrina Carpenter walked off the Kelly Clarkson Show stage, leaving behind a stunned host, a speechless audience, and one of the most jaw-dropping moments in daytime television history. Kelly sat frozen in her chair for several long seconds before the cameras finally cut to commercial. But by then, the damage was already done. The clip would be trending within hours, sparking debates about interview ethics, celebrity privacy, and the fine line between curiosity and exploitation. But in that moment, in that studio, there was only silence and the echo of Sabrina's final words hanging in the air like a challenge that nobody quite knew how to answer. What do you think about Sabrina's decision to walk off the stage? Was Kelly out of line with her questions? Or was Sabrina being too sensitive about discussing the inspiration behind her most personal songs? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the moments that define our favorite celebrities.